9. Peter is near. Not far from Joppa was the town of Lydda. The believers in Joppa heard that the apostle Peter was there. Peter had walked with Jesus. He had seen the Lord heal the sick. He had seen Jesus raise Jairus' daughter. He had seen the empty tomb. He had preached at Pentecost. God had worked miracles through him. So the disciples in Joppa sent 2 men to him. Their message was urgent. Please come at once. They did not send a long explanation. They did not say exactly what Peter should do. They simply asked him to come quickly. Maybe they did not fully know what they hoped for. Maybe grief and faith were mixed together in their hearts. Dorcas was dead, but God was alive. Peter was near, and they could not let the moment pass. The 2 men hurried along the road from Joppa to Lydda. Dust rose around their feet. The sun beat down. Their hearts pounded. When they found Peter, perhaps they were breathless. "Peter," one said, "please come to Joppa." The other added, "At once." Peter looked at their faces and understood the weight of the request. He went with them. Lesson: in grief, faith may be as simple as asking for help. The believers did not have all the answers. They only knew where to turn. They reached out. Sometimes practical compassion means being the person who goes for help. Sometimes it means making the call, sending the message, finding the elder, contacting the doctor, bringing the friend, asking the church to pray. Faith is not always loud. Sometimes it sounds like, "Please come." 10. The upstairs room. When Peter arrived in Joppa, they took him to the upstairs room. The air was heavy with sorrow. The widows stood around him weeping. One by one, they showed him the garments Dorcas had made while she was still with them. "Look," they said, "this cloak, this tunic. She made this. She helped me. She gave this when I had nothing." Their tears were not only for what Dorcas had done. Their tears were for who she had been. Peter listened. He saw the garments. He saw the widows. He saw the love that had filled Dorcas's life. Perhaps he remembered Jesus' words. "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Matthew 25:40. The room was full of the least of these, and Dorcas had served them well. Then Peter asked everyone to leave the room. The widows stepped out, still weeping. The door closed. Peter was alone with the body of Dorcas, and he knelt down and prayed. Lesson: before Peter spoke to Dorcas, he spoke to God. That order matters. Peter did not rely on his own power. He did not perform for the crowd. He did not turn the room into a stage. He knelt and prayed. Practical service and compassion must be rooted in dependence on God. We serve with our hands, but we pray because only God gives life. We comfort with our presence, but we pray because only God heals the deepest wounds. We give what we can, but we pray because only God can multiply grace. Dorcas' story is not only about human kindness, it is about divine power working among compassionate people. 11. Tabitha, get up. Peter prayed. The room was quiet. Outside, the widows waited. Perhaps some were still crying. Perhaps some were whispering prayers. Perhaps some stood silently, holding the garments she had made. Inside the room, Peter turned toward the body and spoke. "Tabitha, get up!" The words were simple. Not many words, not dramatic words, not shouted words. "Tabitha, get up!" And then the impossible happened. Her eyes opened. Dorcas saw Peter. Life had returned. The breath that had left her body came back. Her still hands moved. The silence of death was broken by the mercy of God. Peter gave her his hand and helped her up. Imagine that moment. The woman whose hands had lifted so many others was now lifted by Peter's hand. The servant who had clothed the poor was clothed again with life. The disciple who had shown God's love through practical service now became a living sign of God's power. Peter called the believers and the widows back into the room. The door opened. They entered with swollen eyes and heavy hearts. And there stood Dorcas, alive. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then joy filled the room like sunrise. Naomi cried out. Ruth covered her mouth. Hannah fell to her knees. Someone laughed through tears. Someone shouted praise to God. Dorcas looked at them, perhaps confused, perhaps peaceful, perhaps overwhelmed by their faces. The widows gathered around her, not with garments this time, but with arms. They had lost her. God had restored her. Lesson: God's compassion is greater than death. The raising of Dorcas was a miracle. It was not merely a reward for kindness, it was a revelation of God's power and mercy. Through this miracle, God showed that the life of a humble servant mattered deeply. He saw Dorcas. He saw the widows. He saw the tears in the upstairs room. No act of love is hidden from him. No servant is forgotten by him. No grief is unseen by him.